Hi guys, this is Fernando doing another video for The Modern Survivalist. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you that had subscribed recently. It's great to have more people subscribing to the channel, and just wanted to say that, show my appreciation for you guys showing interest in what I'm doing here. Second, I wanted to remind everyone that there's the modernsurvivalist.com website with lots of information as well, and the forum where we keep getting more and more people, and it's a good place for exchanging ideas. If you want to talk with me or start a thread that you'd be interested in hearing my opinion as well, you can do it there in the forum, and I'll chip in with whatever it is I can help with my suggestions, my point of view. And there's other people as well that are very knowledgeable, that have been into survival and preparedness for a long time as well, and they'll give you their opinion as well. It's gonna be a good experience if you want to be learning something more about a particular topic. So basically that. First of all, thanking you guys for your support and for subscribing to the channel, and reminding everyone that the forum is available for you, and the blog has lots of information of posts I've made through the years, because even though I just started with YouTube videos, I've been posting online for many years now. So there's really a ton of information in the modernsurvivalist.com for you to search. Use the search function. There's the archives of the different topics, so if there's something in particular that you'd like to learn more about, you could use that, as well as using YouTube. You can leave a comment saying what it is you'd like me to cover in future videos. Leave a comment there, or in the channel wall as well. You know, Fernando, I'd like you to cover this or this other topic. It's something that I've been thinking about and I'd like to hear your opinion. That's just fantastic. Leave it there and I'll pick it up and do my best to answer it. In this particular video, I wanted to talk about how you explain what's happening to kids. And let's suppose for a second that things get actually worse than they are now, that the economy collapses or goes into a more serious recession. Just based on what's already been happening, we just know that things aren't the same anymore. It's basic understanding that the world as it used to be 5-10 years ago in USA, it's no longer the same. Things are very different. Things are tougher and getting tougher, and it's a new reality to readjust to. But what happens if it gets even worse? Well, that's what happened here in Argentina, and I think that there's a bit of information I can share with you regarding that, and how you explain it to kids, how you explain the economic collapse to kids. And sometimes we like to think that we're much tougher than we really are, that kids are weaker. Maybe we need to explain it to ourselves as well. So if you bear with me for a few minutes, I'm gonna be going through these talking points. I came up just thinking about what I wanted to talk with you guys. So let's get started. First of all, children adapt easier than adults, and that's why I finally included "and yourself," because I think that we like to think that kids are like these small, weak creatures. Mentally speaking, they are much more capable of coping with all this than we are. Children will be, if the crisis gets worse, if the economy collapses, children will take it in a much better way than adults will. We saw here people committing suicides because they couldn't accept the fact that they lost their jobs, they had no money to sustain their families. We're gonna be getting into a bit more of that later, but my point here in the first one is that kids adapt. They adapt to a poorer lifestyle, if you want to put it that way. Adults, you lose your car, you lose the car you were used to, you lose the life standards you were used to, hanging in the social circle your income afforded you to do so. Losing that status is much harder for adults than for kids. Kids, they don't care as much about those things, and mostly it's I'm not talking here only about superficial things and things that don't matter. I'm talking about parents that aren't concerned about not being able to buy the latest BMW anymore, but parents that are concerned about their kids suffering because of the loss of quality in their life, right? So it's not a superficial issue about people that are always worried about the latest trendy clothes or the car they have or the big McMansion house. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about good people that sincerely suffer thinking of what their kids are going to be going through because they can no longer afford what they used to. So there's a bit of a difference there. And children, they will deal with it much better than adults, no question there. You see this also during wartime, kids playing among the debris of shelled cities. Kids, they always find a way of getting around, and because of basic nature instinct, kids are much easier. They handle all this much easier than adults will. You won't see kids committing suicide because of an economic collapse. You will see the adults doing that. You will see adults throwing themselves under a train like they did in Argentina a lot after the economy collapsed in 2001. But kids, no. Kids are much tougher in that regard. Now, in spite of kids being tougher, how do you explain things to kids versus should I be protecting them from what's going on? Should I be creating a wall around them and not showing them what's going on? It is a bit of a discussion topic on its own, and there's good points on both of them, on explaining things and protecting them from the reality that's going on. What happened to me with my kids, I have an 8-year-old, so during the worst of the crisis, he was small enough so that the protecting him from it made more sense. Okay, you try not to let him see what's going on in terms of the poverty on the street and such. We had here and we still have like very small kids begging on the streets or eating out of the trash, and eventually your son, when he grows a bit older, he's gonna be asking you why is that kid, a kid that is just as old as he is, maybe 5-6 years old, alone on the streets. Some of the questions I got from my son was where are his mom and daddy? Why is he alone on the street? Common sense questions, at least for a kid that age. He just doesn't understand why a child as small as he is alone on the street. Why is that kid barefoot? Why is he so dirty, mom, dad? Why is he looking so dirty? Why is it in that situation? And how do you explain all that? You just do your best. In that case, you cannot protect him from it. You have to start the first part. You have to start explaining some of the things, because kids aren't stupid and they see that there's something not okay, right? You have to explain these things because they start asking. Once kids start asking, it's not a good idea to keep on the protecting them phase, right? Because it's clear by then that it's clear enough for them, and they're not ignorant of the situation anymore. So it's better if you start explaining it. So you tell them that his mom and dad probably don't have any money because they are very poor, and they are probably good people as well as you and me and everything else, but they're going through a very hard time, and that's why that little kid is begging for money on the streets, or that's why that little kid has no shoes because his parents cannot afford them anymore, or that's why he's eating out of the trash. So at least what I try to explain to him is that that's the reality for some of the kids in the country and around the world as well, and that he should consider himself very fortunate, that he should be very appreciative of what he has, because as he can see right now, many kids aren't in that same situation. They are in much more unfavorable ones, and he should be grateful and thank God for what he has and the position he still is in. There's also a problem with with crime. You're just watching TV, you're watching the news, and all of a sudden, as it happens on daily basis, they start talking about whoever got murdered, killed during a home invasion, during a robbery, when exiting a bank, when a 12-year-old that got kidnapped by 16-year-olds, and if they hurt him or not. When the first time that my son started asking me about this, there was this particularly heinous crime where a criminal that had been released, because we now have a government that considers that criminals are just poor victims of society, right? So the general stance is to let criminals go instead of keeping them where they should. So this particular criminal, he was let go right after a person testified against him. This criminal went for him. He kidnapped this man, his wife, and his 2 kids. He tied them all up and shot them all in the head and threw them on the side of the road. So the news was that they had found the bodies. First, they found the bodies of the adults, the man that had testified against him, and his wife, tied and shot in the head, and then they found the kids that they had been murdered as well. My son just heard that, and it was all over the news, so it was pretty much unavoidable. So he started asking me about it, and you start explaining that there's these people that are extremely mean, they're very bad, and the first thing that kids ask is, oh, you mean what, like in movies? Yeah, sort of like in movies, but these are very real people. They just look like anyone else. They're not monsters. They don't have masks or uniforms of any particular kind, but they're just people that look like us, but they're very mean and they're very prone to violence and such. So you have to be more careful. You have to be aware. You have to remember not to talk to strangers, or God forbid, never go with one. If he's picking you in school, he's trying to take you with your mom and dad. You explain to your kid that only you and your wife or some other adults or family member is going to be picking them up, and they should not go with anyone else by any means. And that's kind of important, because right after the economic collapse, we started seeing lots of kids being kidnapped, because kids are easy targets, easy victims. 10 years old, 11 years old kids, you don't see them around the street alone anymore if the parents can help it. In the school where my kid goes, there's parents, their grandparents, someone's always picking them up. In some of the poorest parts of the city, you see kids going on and around by themselves, but people that can do better for them, you're always there for them, because you understand that in a society as violent as it is this one, where crime is basically out of control, let's be honest about it, it's not under control in any way, so it's out of control. In such a society, kids are an easy victim. Kids, older folks, those are favorable victims by criminals. So you have to take care of them a bit better. So that's the versa thing. Should I be protecting them from what's going on? Shall create a wall around what's going on? That makes sense up to a point, but eventually you have to start explaining things, not only because they ask, but because they'll be safer if they understand within their age, within their capabilities of understanding. You start explaining some of these things to them. It's important to create a safe environment. Kids should feel perfectly safe at home. So in spite of having to explain some of the violent crime going on and some of the dangers they are now exposed to, you still have to make them absolutely certain that they're 100% safe at home. Your child must feel that. It's important for his development, his mental development as well. You're not going to be having a healthy kid if he grows up thinking that anyone can burst through the door and hurt him at any time. Even though that's unfortunately what happens many times, if you do take some steps towards preparing yourself and your family, if you harden your house, as we've seen in some of the videos before, taking some of the measures and learning a bit about self-defense, maybe if you're adult enough and you have the maturity to do so, owning a firearm at home, knowing how to handle it. If you have a house that is not easily broken into, you have a firearm to protect your family, you are indeed creating a much safer environment for your family. Most houses these days in USA, you can just kick them out, kick them down, walk in and do whatever you want. Eventually, yes, things get worse as crime gets worse in general terms. People will understand that having a door that can be kicked down just that easily, it's not safe, and the bar of security in general will have to be raised a bit. So I suggest looking into that and seeing what it is you can do to create a safer home for yourself and your family. And again, for your child, for your kid, it's going to be important to feel that his mom, his dad are perfectly capable of protecting them, and their home is safe, and they can sleep sound at night because nothing's going to be happening to them. Life for children at school, home, and security concerns, that's what I'm talking about. So we were seeing lots of these kids in schools getting kidnapped, especially the private schools, the more expensive ones. Just because of the school uniform a child was wearing, the criminals could determine so how much money a parent would have. So if you're paying $1,000 worth of private school, if you're paying $500 worth of private school, at least you would have that amount of money at hand in general, usually a bit more maybe. So they just looked for a child walking down the street that was using a uniform that belonged to such school. Knowing how much it was worth, they would take that kid and ask for a ransom right away. Those were called and are called express kidnappings, where they just take you based on something like that, like the school uniform of a kid, the car you're driving maybe, that also dictates a social standard you have, an average income you have just because of the car you're driving. So those are things that criminals looked for and are still looking for when doing these express kidnappings. Express kidnappings are the ones that happen fast. They are resolved within the same day. They're usually on a lower amount of ransom being asked, because they just want to get over it quick. Instead of just robbing someone on the street, they just pick him up, drive him around a bit, do the call, and see how much money they can get for such person or such child in a short notice. One thing that also changed is that kids no longer can play on the streets by themselves as they probably did once. That's one of the things that have changed. In when I was a child, I'm 32 years old, so I'm not that old. It wasn't that long ago, so I still remember that when you were 11, 12, 14, if you're 15 years old, you were on the street and you were relatively safe, right? If these days, even a kid that's a teenager, that you consider him an adult, he may not be as safe as he used to. So you want to keep an eye on them. Maybe by the time they're 15, they start moving around on their own, right, as they usually do. But in times like these, you have to be extra careful, because they're still naive in many ways, and they're not as worldly as some of the adults are. So they are much easier victims of robberies. They're much easier to be fooled and lied to. So they're a bit more naive in general. Children, that's even worse. Children, I mean, I don't know any responsible adult that leaves a 10-year-old these days walk home from school, even if he's just a couple of blocks away. Adults that are responsible, they just don't leave kids walking back home on their own, because it's no longer, in some of the safe places around the world, it's the age by which a kid can safely cross the street is basically, that's your greatest concern. You're not concerned about him being a victim of a violent crime. So that changes, and when that changes, you have to be on them more, spend more time with them, protect them more than you used to, until they are old enough to fend for themselves. And it's usually a bit older than it used to be before. So your kids are no longer riding the bicycle in front of your house without you watching all the time. You have to be watching them all the time, so they lose some of that freedom they used to have. When going to, the thing you do is they organize so as to play in someone's house, you know, in their backyard, that it's gated or has walls, has a perimeter of some sort, not on the street, not on the sidewalk. That's really not safe anymore. So let's keep going. We have another point: job loss, dignity, and providing for your family. That's regarding yourself, especially among the survival and preparedness community. You saw lots of people that were prepared for pretty much anything, or at least that's what they thought. They had lots of guns, the food, and all this preparedness stuff, which is great. But all of a sudden they lost their jobs, and they didn't find one. A month went by, nothing. 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and no jobs. That starts affecting people, and you have to keep in mind that some of these guys were actually well prepared, and at least they thought they were, but they weren't prepared for something such as simple as losing your job. And by dignity, I mean that we have to change the way we perceive some things. For some of the older folks, there's a dignity with a job. There's a dignity within providing for your family, and when you lose your job and you don't find one, that dignity is taken away from you. What we have to start understanding is that things are different, and that you may be a very capable person, you may be a caring parent and husband and such, but there's still not jobs. Depending on some of the places you live these days, guys, it's easy to spend 6 months without finding a job. And it's not because of any personal problem of yours, it's not because you're lazy. That used to be the standard we had, especially 30, 40 years olds. We thought that, of course, if you weren't working, that's because you didn't want a job, because there was always a job for a hard-working person. Someone that was committed, he always would have a job. It was unthinkable that you would spend a year, 6 months without finding a job. That's because you didn't want one, right? And unfortunately, in some places, it's not that way. And as things get worse, it may be as it happened here in Argentina, where people honestly looked for jobs for 6 or 12 months and they didn't find it. I've seen it myself. I've seen some very hard-working people, guys in their 40s, 50s, you know, during the crisis in 2002, 50-year-old guy that lost his job. He was in a world of trouble because he wasn't gonna be finding anything anytime soon. It was extremely hard for some people. I've actually had people basically begging me for a job, even though I didn't have any. I mean, I wasn't in a position of having any job or anything, of giving jobs away, but I had people that had been managers in companies, you know, grown-up men that had worked their entire lives, reach 50, suddenly finding themselves in these situations. It was really terrible for them. They were just begging for a job. If you know, if you have anything, if you hear anything, just please let me know. I'm so desperate to find a job. That was a conversation that you used to have with some of these folks. It was very hard for them, and that dignity, that workers' dignity was stolen from them, along with their savings when the banks closed and the economy collapsed. So I think that's what killed people the most. Looking into retrospective, it wasn't the crime that kills people every day. It wasn't poverty. For the middle class person, what killed most of the people was the stress, the anguish of living in such a way, of having that dignity being taken away from them by losing their jobs and not being able to provide for their family. A guy that has been working his entire life, 20, 30 years, and suddenly finds himself without a job, it can be crushing indeed. So this point, guys, this is for yourselves and how you explain kids and look to your kids in their face. It's sometimes very hard for people. One thing you can do about this is start preparing as of now. Okay, if you took the necessary steps, remember when I talk about the 6 or 12 months worth of food, That's because of this. That's not because zombies will be destroying Earth or aliens will be invading and you'll be in your bunker eating your 12 months worth of food. That's because you may be 6 or 12 months without a job, and at least during that time, if you plan accordingly, putting food on the table will not be a problem, at least for that period of time, and that keeps your dignity longer. Okay, and it makes it easier going out every day looking for a job when you know that at least there's gonna be food on the table every single night until for a while. So you buy yourself time by stocking up on food and some of these supplies. You know, if you have the 6 or 12 months worth of food in storage, if you have some cash you put away, some precious metals maybe, and eventually if you have to, you end up selling some of them so as to pay for some of the bills, some of the most basic bills, so as to keep afloat. At least you have more time, right? Food, just understand that it's gonna keep going up. As of 10 years from now, expect food to double in price. I saw it today on the news. They were talking about food doubling in price in 20 years. I think it's gonna be much sooner than that. At least the food that you eat right now, the quality of food you eat these days, because there's different quality of food as well. And as things get worse, you start buying lower quality, right? When you can no longer afford the good one. So I think it's gonna be doubling in price 10 years from now. So you might as well stock up now on food, have a good amount of it in case something like this happens. At least you'll be able to provide for your family longer. Finally, what to do about it: spend time with children, giving them the right tools for a tougher future. Well, as everything changes with an economic collapse, it changes on every single level you can think of, and that includes the life of kids as well. Kids, the violence in society is not going to be only reserved to criminal activities. It's going to be a more violent society in general terms. The amount of incidents of road rage where normal people end up beating each other, sometimes even killing each other over nothing, the amount of those incidents will be going up because there's going to be more violence in general, more people upset, more people that had lost their jobs, that are going through tough times themselves, people that maybe started abusing drugs because they can't cope with what's going on. All these things are factors that affect society on every single level. That violence will be seen in schools, and kids will be suffering as well. More bullying, more fights in school. All that sort of stuff will be going up. It's going to be more common. It's going to be happening to your kids. So one thing that I made sure was that I taught my kid how to defend himself if he was ever in a fight with another kid in school. No, it used to be that you told your kid, okay, go to your if a bully bothers you or if he beats you up, go to your teacher and tell him. Tell what's going on, and that would be taken care of. These days it's so common that a kid really has to know how to defend himself from other kids as well, and unfortunately it's a way in which he's going to be understanding some of the things. It happens when you're a kid, it's going to be happening when you're an adult as well. You have to be able to cope with things, with these problems yourself. You have to be able to protect yourself as a kid on its own level, in the level of a schoolyard fight, and you have to be able to protect yourself as well when older from criminals, from people that are aggressive to you and want to harm you or your family. You have to be able to do such things, right? So I see that as a way of orienting a child in the right direction, understanding that what's better for a school, which is having the kid go to a principal or a teacher and telling him what's happening, it's maybe not the best for himself. The only way in which I've seen that a kid stops being bullied all day long is if he stands for himself and stops it himself. At least that's the way it works around here. So it also creates a sense of self-sufficiency in a child, because he understands that he's able of coping with problems himself. He doesn't need other people to stand for him against people of his same level, against other children, right? And being able to do those things on your own will create the right personality needed for a tougher future as well. So it's pretty, it goes into different levels as well. It's not only about bullying and schoolyard fights. It's about creating a personality of a person that is much more independent and much more capable of dealing with problems themselves. So that's some of the points I wanted to talk about in this particular video. If you have any other suggestions or video suggestions, topics you'd like you would be interested in me covering, just leave a comment here and I'll do my best to reply to them, guys. So that's gonna be it for now, folks. Remember to subscribe to the video, the modernsurvivalist.com blog with lots of information, and the forum there as well. If you want to be talking with me about any subject you want to discuss, just drop by and start a thread over there. And see you on our next video. Take care.